Today we're going to be taking the double and half angle formulas and using those to simplify trigonometric expressions. To summarize all of them, first of all, we have the double angle formulas. The reason why these are called double angle is because if you look inside of each of the parentheses, we have 2 theta, meaning we're doubling the angle. So for the first equation, and this is the one I have all of my students memorize, we have sine of 2 theta is equal to 2 sine theta cosine theta. There's a lot of different ways to remember this particular formula, but I would say the easiest way is actually just to keep repeating it. So again, sine of 2 theta, meaning sine of twice the angle theta, is equal to 2 sine theta times cosine of theta. This one's easy to remember too because there's 2 2's in it, okay? So sine of 2 theta equals 2 sine theta cosine theta. You say that one enough, you're going to remember it. Next we have cosine of 2 theta. This one doesn't look anything like the sine of 2 theta. So cosine of 2 theta is equal to 2 cosine squared theta minus 1. Again, if you say it enough, 2 cosine squared minus 1, that's also an easy one to remember, cosine of 2 theta. I will go back later and show proofs for each of these double angle formulas. Next, we have a variance of cosine of 2 theta. So both of these formulas represent cosine of 2 theta. The bottom one is in terms of sine though. So the bottom one is cosine of 2 theta equals 1 minus 2 sine squared. So again, the top is 2 cosine squared minus 1. Notice that basically what happens is you're taking this one and you're flipping it and putting the 1 first. And then, but for the bottom one becomes sine squared instead of cosine squared. So again, the top one is 2 cosine squared minus 1. The bottom one is 1 minus 2 sine squared, and they both equal cosine of 2 theta. You'll just have to make note cards or whatever mnemonic method you might want to use in order to memorize these. Next, we have tangent of 2 theta. Again, all of these are called double angle formulas because we have 2 theta inside of each set of parentheses. Tangent of 2 theta is equal to 2 tangent of theta over 1 minus tangent squared theta. This one might take a while to remember because it's a fraction and involves both a tangent and a tangent squared. But again, it's tangent of 2 theta is equal to 2 tan theta divided by 1 minus tangent squared of theta. Those are the double angle formulas. The next set of formulas are called half angle formulas. The reason they're called half angle is because if you look inside of each set of parentheses, you have theta divided by 2, meaning taking the angle and dividing it by 2 or cutting it in half. So for our first formula, we have sine of theta over 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine theta over 2. That's a lot, and these are not easy to remember, so it might take you up to 30 minutes to memorize both the double and half angle formulas. Let's go ahead and look at cosine of theta over 2 so we can easily compare it with sine. For cosine theta over 2, we have plus or minus the square root of 1 plus cosine theta over 2. The only difference between sine and cosine is this sign right here inside of the square root on the top of the fraction. So for sine of theta over 2, you have, for sine of theta over 2, you have plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine of theta over 2. For cosine of theta over 2, you have plus or minus the square root of 1 plus cosine of theta over 2. That's the only difference between sine of theta over 2 and cosine of theta over 2. Okay, so last we have 2 variations for the tangent. The reason for that is sometimes you want to write tangent of theta over 2 in terms, well actually they're both in terms of sine and cosine. Each of these applications is going to be different depending on what you're trying to simplify. So for the top one, we have tangent of theta over 2 equals 1 minus cosine theta over sine of theta. On the bottom, we have tangent of theta over 2 equals sine of theta over 1 plus cosine of theta. You can see how these are very similar. Basically, you're taking this expression, moving it to the bottom and putting a plus sign on it, and then sine of theta just moving to the top. So you can kind of see that basically what's going on here is just flipping and changing the sign between those 2 tangent of theta over 2 formulas. So those are all the formulas summarized. If you have any questions about these 8 formulas, let me know.